Most people do not like tests. In school, I didn't like pop quizzes. I also didn't enjoy midterms or finals. Tests can be stressful, and sometimes they can make your heart race. Welcome to the Word for 2021. When I worked in radio, I worked as a DJ. And as I was working there in the radio station, we would have a broadcast log. And during that broadcast log, it would tell us when we were to play music, when the commercials were to be played, and also when we were to run a test of the emergency broadcast system. We were not to give an announcement that it's coming. We were simply to give the announcement when it happened that this is a test of the emergency broadcast system. This is only a test. And then we would have to hit an annoying test tone. After the tone was over, I would get back on the air. I would say, "This has been a test of the emergency broadcast system. This has been only a test. If this were a real emergency, you'd have been directed to this local station for more information." Abraham was about to have a test, and he did not know that it was a test. Here in chapter 22, in verse 1, it says that God was going to test Abraham. So he came to him, and he said that he was to take his son, his only son Isaac, and offer him up as a burnt sacrifice. Abraham had a choice to make. Would he obey God, or would he cherish Isaac and disobey God? Abraham's faith was going to be tested, and our faith will be tested too. Anything of value will always be tested. In 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7, this is what we read. "In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may be proved genuine and may result in praise, glory, honor when Jesus Christ is revealed." A test is there to find out if what is there is true and genuine. Abraham's faith was tested, and our faith will be tested. Now again, Abraham did not know that this was a test. He didn't know the rest of the story, but he was willing to believe God and to trust him because he knew God's character. He knew God's faithfulness, that God would keep his promises. Therefore, he fully obeyed and he fully committed himself to the Lord. As Abraham obeyed, then a ram that was caught in the thicket made a noise. Up until that time, that was the quietest ram ever. But after the angel told Abraham, "Do not harm your son," then he noticed the ram in the thicket caught by its horns. And that ram was used as the burnt sacrifice. When he obeyed, then God provided. Now this is the key. Obedience always comes before provision. Let me say that again. Obedience always comes before provision. If we want God to provide, we need to first obey him, surrender to him, and trust that he will provide. I once heard the story of a little girl, and she was in her house, and her house was on fire. Her father was outside at night underneath her window. Smoke was billowing everywhere, and he was yelling for her. And she yelled out the window, "Dad, help me, help me." And he said, "My daughter, jump." She said, "But I can't see you." Then the father said, "Don't worry, I can see you. Just jump." And because she trusted her father, she jumped into the unknown, right into the waiting arms of her loving father. Abraham was willing to give up that which was most important to him before he saw God's provision, because he determined to worship the one that gave him the blessing rather than the blessing itself. God was going to be first in his life, even if he didn't understand what the future was going to be. Hudson Taylor once said this, "When God's work is done in God's way, it will never lack God's supply." When we put God first, God will take care of the rest. The challenge today is to always put God first. Even when we don't know what the future is going to be, we know that God is faithful and trustworthy. Thank you for joining the Word for 2021.